as I was saying, this is something that was a culmination that kind of came up from Explore last year and trying to find a good space for people in digital workspace, mainly Workspace One people, to kind of get together and share ideas and have a good place to, learn and develop and grow. So here we are. We started a couple months ago. We have 100 members. And we're just going to get started. We're going to kick off with an intro, introduce the speakers, and then from there, we'll pass over to Johan for our first session. So as I was saying, this is a quick overview, 100 members in about 2 months. This isn't going to be run probably like any other VMUG, probably a little unique in some aspects. For me, large focus on kind of mental health and wellness and trying to bring in some good opportunities. As we said, a safe space, and idea is overall engagement. One of the big priority changes with this VMUG versus others is that in every single session, we're going to have one speaker who's never spoken before. Today, that person is Stephen Wagner. As we really want to, help people kind of, make this a safe space to kind of share ideas and grow and stuff like that. And so that's something that I think is important because a lot of us struggle, especially with speaking in front of people and things like that. So we think it's a kind of a good area to kind of, springboard off into other things like Explore and brown bags and things like that. So real quick, mission statement. With the growth of digital workspace, we've often struggled to kind of find a safe space. Myself personally, I attended VMUG in Boston, and I was told Workspace One is not an EUC technology. It's the last time I went to a VMUG in person, truth be told. The real goal for this, for me, is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, is kind of building this safe space where you don't feel like you're less than, or you don't feel like you're somebody who just kind of activates iPhones and things like that, everyone's experiences and everything are important, and everyone brings a unique kind of mindset. And there's going to be a lot of focus within this VMUG on kind of helping each other and, improving mental health, removing EUC stigmas, and trying to accentuate how important EUC is, which I think is more important now than ever, given the landscape and the way some things are changing, day by day. And you'll see in the coming months, we are going to be having, in-person sessions and things like that. And one of the main goals is to try to not just get together and chat, but also try to provide some kind of cross training and some kind of knowledge that you may not have had before. So you actually get, kind of get something out of it. Come on, slide. There we go. So today's agenda. So we're going to start off with the man who needs no introduction, Mr. Johan, with what if Jurassic Park had digital workspace, which, truth be told, we were supposed to do at Explore, and then things changed and shifted. But amazing session that he's given at a few places now, and then we'll see again at EUC Day in a few months. Followed by Stephen Wagner's Intro to VDI, which is a really great opportunity, I think, to show people some stuff. And then finishing up with Sascha's introduction into the VMware Identity Services, which many of you may not be quite aware of, but may be impacting all of you in the kind of the near term. And just kind of give you an idea if you don't know who I am. Most people who join this probably have an idea of who I am. So neurodiverse with ADHD, worked with AirWatch and VMware stuff for the last 8 years, double VCP, banned from VMware Reddit, yay. Sometimes I say on premises, and I don't care that people ridicule me for it, because, sometimes I say the wrong thing. That's okay. That's kind of my brand. But like I said, I've been around a long time. Maybe not so long. If we were talking about Carl Webster, obviously I'm like a third of what he's done. But in mobile space, I've been around a good amount of time. Had the opportunity to speak multiple times. Was not so great at it. Have gotten a little better.
Did his first keynote last year.
Right. In the fine area of the Netherlands, where I was one of 2 people who spoke English. Yes. But yeah, you are not wrong, Johan. It was a very, very special time for me, being able to come out there, meet some just amazing people. So some of the ways you can help, mainly the thing for me is, helping others to come and join the group. If you're in the session and you haven't joined the VMUG digital workspace, we'd really appreciate if you would. They tried to, just so everyone has the history, they tried to do this with EUC years ago and it fell on its face. And I was told, oh, this just fell on its face. I don't know why you're going to bother, but I don't like being told I can't do something. So I really am going to put in a lot of time, money, and effort into this. For example, anyone in our group that does go to explore, I will be hosting a dinner at a very nice restaurant in Vegas. This means a lot to me at a personal level to help others. And so I'm really hoping that you guys will enjoy what we're going to be doing here, help engage, drive the conversation forward and help others, come and join. And in closing, join us. There's a little tiny URL for joining this digital workspace VMUG. And also that's our new Twitter handle, which is still kind of in the works. And so from here, I want to pass it to the man who needs no introduction, the incomparable Thor-like master of EUC, VDI, NVIDIA, everything, Mr. Johan van Amersfoort. And I apologize if I messed up your name.
Oh no, that sounds perfectly fine. Thanks, John, for the awesome introduction. Let me try if I could share my screen. First of all, John, thanks so much for setting this all up. I think it's there's a space for EUC community, like focused community. So I think, again, big thank you for setting this up. Also, thank your company Synterex for sponsoring this first edition of the Digital Workspace VMUG. I'm looking forward to seeing what your plans are for the future. And as a fellow VMUG leader, and there's another one in this in the panelist group. I think focus like meeting up at Explore would be definitely awesome. So looking forward to that. So this session is it's a session that I presented at the VMware Explore in Vegas or in San Francisco last year for the first time. But this is the session involved. I added some real cool stuff to the demos I'll show, and especially from hopefully something you haven't seen before. Basically mixing Workspace ONE UEM or Workspace ONE in general with Horizon to achieve some really cool things. So John already spoiled the beans. My name is Johan. I'm a nerd. I'm a technologist. I work at IDQ. As with a primary focus on creating content, developing services, doing some pre-sales, and basically travel around the world to talk about EUC and where basically my passion lies. I've created some video content on our YouTube channel. If you haven't seen it before, please do so. It's there's a wide variety of content of which I both created, but also a lot of my colleagues did so. There's some kind of poll doing stuff. So I wrote a couple of books on the topic of VDI. So the VDI Design Guide Part 1 and 2 mainly focused on everything Horizon, and I'm kind of building plans to create a third book. I think a third might be the best if you look at several movies where, to be fairly honest, I think Return of the Jedi is the best of the three first ones. So this might be the best book that might be coming up somewhere next year. So I'm also a host on several podcasts, the Unexplored Territory podcast, which I create with Duncan and Frank, and there is some news to talk about as well. I'm working on a very unofficial VMware EUC podcast, probably bi-weekly. I recorded some stuff already, and the plan is to release it somewhere in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So check out the my Twitter handle, my basically all my socials, and then you'll find out. Now, this session is something is about a topic that's hot, if you will, but also kind of dear to me. I grew in security the last 5 to 6 years, and security in general, when talking about digital workspaces, is a challenge because from one hand you have IT and security teams that have a lot of demands and want to force end users into working as secure as possible, and the other hand you have end users that don't want to work with secure things because security will negatively impact their user experience. Now, that's what this session is all about. And I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions. The first one, what should a secure digital workspace look like? I think very important that it should look as simple as possible. Also, what solutions would this decrease an attack surface? So the smaller the attack surface within a virtual desktop or a workspace in general, the better it is. How can we, and this is something that a lot of organizations kind of miss out on, like how can we ensure that the employee actually feels secure? So we as IT can state that they're in a secure state, like the desktop is secured. But what if they want to check if they're secure? So how can we ensure that? And the last question, how can we achieve all of this without impacting IT too much? Because when implementing a lot of security tools, it automatically quite often means that IT has a shit ton of work suddenly. Like take NSX, for instance. If you want to implement NSX, sure, it's a checkbox. Now we have NSX, right? So if you're implementing microsegmentation just for east-west traffic, it's fairly doable, right? So or something. Sorry, yeah. So if you block east-west traffic, that's done. But now, if you add rules to north and south traffic as well, you probably need a couple of people in your team to manage that on a daily basis. So that's a challenge. Now, a question to the audience, and John, maybe you could we can raise hands, right? So I have a question to the audience. Who can tell me what went wrong in the original Jurassic Park movie? And let's see, do we have some form of interaction with the audience, John?
Yeah, it's a lot of talk. I think you can do that as well.
Can people just open up their mics?
Yep, I just asked Andrew to. Andrew's got his, so I just asked him to.
Yeah, nobody knew Linux.
Well, it was Unix, but what happened before that?
They didn't pay the guy enough, the automation engineer. They had one guy who knew everything.
Dude, you're continuing for the fridge. So yeah, definitely true. So Jurassic Park basically is an IT movie. So Jurassic Park could be avoided if they just hired more than one IT guy. So what they did is they hired one IT guy. They underpaid him. He went rogue by selling embryos on the black market. That's how the whole shitstorm of Jurassic Park 1, 2, 3, etc. Originated. So if they just hired another IT guy, then the whole thing was solved, right? And the fun fact is, I don't think it's a fun fact, but Jurassic Park by itself is not unique. So I have a lot of conversations with different customers around the fact that they have a single IT silo or a single person responsible for a single thing within their organization. Now, what happens if that someone moves on, leaves the company? Then you have a challenge. And in a workspace where IT basically defines everything for the end user is something we call an IT-defined workspace. Now, if you have some something like an IT-defined workspace where you demand or you decide for the end user that they like work on a Windows 10 based laptop, which is completely blocked. It's pre-installed with all sorts of applications. Everything they need from a permission perspective is revoked, so they don't have permissions. You basically demand or decide everything for the end user is what we call an IT-defined workspace. But what if you do something and you have that single person running IT or a single person running firewalling or something else? And for the sake of this presentation, let's call that person Dennis. Now, if Dennis, in this case, starts selling those embryos on the black market, you have a challenge. If you look at an IT-defined workspace, and I'm by show of hands, does anyone recognize this model? Well, I hope Sascha does, but outside of Sascha, John does. So this is the digital workspace journey model, and it's basically a model that we use to pinpoint where a customer in his journey towards a digital workspace or digital enterprise is. And we do that over different angles. So, for instance, if they're using traditional AD services, directory services, but they want to do full force federation, conditional access on web-based apps, SAML integration on all their apps, then that's not going to fly. So you need to move a customer towards a more user-centric approach or a digital enterprise in order to do so. Another thing that we came across when working with a customer is that we had a certain customer that was 100% working or supporting an IT-defined workspace, and their IT department was commonly known as the Department of No, because they had everything predefined. So if a road warrior or like a salesperson or someone else wanted a 13-inch laptop instead of a big 17-inch one, that was a challenge because they couldn't handle those requests. And what you want to be as an IT department is at the far right, where you have that digital enterprise, where you basically use digital technologies for your benefit, but also maybe even to drive business through that technology. And I'll explain a bit more about that later in the presentation. Now, the only marketing slide I have is around the VMware Anywhere Workspace. I'm honestly not even sure if we're still allowed to use the phrase Anywhere Workspace. I see Sascha slowly moving his head around, so I need to change this.
VMUG still has it. They still actually have a thing on their website for Anywhere Workspace.
Right.
Because I complained that there was no link to my group on Anywhere Workspace.
Okay.
So, yeah, they have VMware Anywhere Workspace solutions on their website.
Right. So, well, I'm talking about the whole suite of EUC solutions, right? So it consists out of 3 pillars. The first one is the EUC stack. So it's basically Workspace ONE and VMware Horizon with all solutions that are part of it. We have a security stack of solutions, Carbon Black, Secure Access, but also MTD. XDR was quite recently announced, I think a couple of days ago from Carbon Black. So there's a rich set of security solutions, and there's everything happening around connectivity. So SASE currently, well, includes SD-WAN and VMware Tunnel, but there's a lot happening in the connectivity space as well. So I think these 3 pillars are the most important pillars when it comes to designing your EUC solutions with great user experience in mind, but also with security. Security is really important in this. And why would you use why is this important? Well, a lot of organizations have been spending a crap load of money to build physical offices that were really awesome. And these are all, I think, from Google's office in the Netherlands, with a swing and a barbecue and a I don't know, a trailer where you can have meetings in, and baristas and 40 types of grains for in the morning, etc. It's really awesome. But what if your physical office looks awesome? Someone signs a contract there, and now they start onboarding like a week later. And the whole onboarding process and everything around the digital workspace completely sucks. That's where your shit happens. I read an article on a research paper last week or the week before, where it states that almost and it was an article published by Adobe. They do a yearly research on their own employees, that I think 60% would consider moving towards another organization if the digital workspace or the tools that they get offered basically frustrate them. So I think it's really important to take this into account. Right, so enough with the talking. Demo time. So I got a crap load of demos, and I'm going to basically guide you through what we think the onboarding process of an employee should look like. And the first demo is basically on unboxing. We're going to power up a device and drink some coffee. Now, what you see here is a 10-minute demo, but I fast forwarded the demo a couple of moments because of Microsoft Minutes, and Microsoft is doing stuff while we are waiting. Hence the fast forward sections, as you can see now. Now, what's important to know is that the device was shipped to an end user. The power button was pressed, and then this basically happens. So we're almost 3 minutes in. I'll take a sip of my water instead of coffee. Apparently, Windows has some important setup to do. So the first thing after almost 4 minutes is that the end user will sign in with their AD credentials, Azure AD credentials. They'll select the Workspace ONE environment where they are working from and sign in. And they're welcomed into Workspace ONE UEM. So this, again, may take several minutes. So we configured Windows Hello for them. So they currently use their phone to sign into through MFA. They're creating a PIN, and they're basically all set. So after a little over 5 minutes, the first thing they now see is basically the desktop. The Intelligent Hub will automatically pop up. And for sake of the demo, the end user needs to sign into my Workspace ONE environment. Again. And they're now signed into the Intelligent Hub. At the top right, you will see in a bit that some tools will automatically be installed. The first one is the Carbon Black Cloud sensor. After a couple of seconds, that's installed. And as you can see, the end user already has access to most of the corporate applications he or she needs. Now, the next thing that will happen is that VMware Tunnel will automatically be installed, followed by a reboot in a bit. Yes. Now, remember that we set up the PIN just before. So the only thing the end user now has to do is enter the PIN. And in this case, Han, the end user, will sign in. The Intelligent Hub will open up. We're nearly 10 minutes in. And at the bottom right, the end user gets a really nice message from their friends from IT stating that the machine is enrolled, it's secured, and it's now ready to work. Literally in 10 minutes. And in this case, it means that from a security perspective, Carbon Black is installed, encryption is enforced, Tunnel has been installed. It's been, the device was patched and updated. So what secured means in this way is it's compliant to all the security policies that we enforce. And now it actually means that the end user is secure and they can work and do whatever they need to do. And why is this important? Well, if there's one certainty, right? We know that end users will break stuff. They will for sure break stuff, and it might not be intentionally. It could be unintentionally. I mean, they could. They will connect to public Wi-Fi connections and connect over maybe even insecure networks. They will do that. They'll probably pick up USB flash drives or download files from websites you don't know. And a fun story here is that a colleague of mine is a white hat hacker, and he regularly hands over flash drives with logos of trusty vendors on it, and at road shows, trade shows. And what happens is, like, if you have such a flash drive with that logo on it, you'll obviously take it home, put it in your machine, and the first thing that thing does is call home. And home is not the vendor. Home is basically the environment my colleague built to if he wants to take over the environment, and he does this for instance on behalf of those vendors. So to see also how their security measures are taken, etc. So be aware. This is really this is a thing. And finally, end users hate passwords. They do, myself included. So we need to do something to mitigate all of those security related issues, I would say. So next demo, I'm going to show the tunnel. I'm going to go through the config of the tunnel, and I'm going to show the transparency of the applications. Now, the starting point of this demo is where we ended with the previous one. So the first thing that happens is the end user will receive the message stating that they're secured and enrolled, and now they can work. And first thing we do is open up the tunnel, and you can see that Chrome, in this case, is managed through the tunnel. So every traffic that happens through Chrome is being tunneled, and through Edge, in this case, is not. So for the sake of this demo, I have two browsers open, Edge at the right, Chrome at the left. If I now Google for a gambling website at the right, you can see through Edge, I can browse through to the website, no issues there. If I paste the URL in Chrome, in this case, it's blocked, automatically blocked, as the website is classified as a gambling website. Again, without the end user having to install anything, this was automatically enforced to the device. Now, for the next demo, I'm going to show how, in this case, the tunnel could, or the whole security setup integrates with the EDR solution. So in this case, Carbon Black. So we're going to browse to a weird website. We're going to download malware, and we're going to show some magic. So starting point is again where we ended in the previous demo. So I'm going to open up a website called icar.org, and you can basically download test malware from that website. If I try to do that through Chrome, you'll see that downloading the file is automatically blocked by, in this case, the Cloud Web Security solution. If I try to do so with Edge, I can download the file. I can even open it up on, for instance, from my Explorer. And if I try to unzip it, I can do so. But as soon as I try to execute the file, Carbon Black intervenes, and access to the file is blocked. So basically, Carbon Black, in this case, works as a fail-safe in case the Cloud Web Security does accept something, or does or something is not filtered enough, then automatically Carbon Black intervenes in this case. So I think it's a really powerful demo that shows what security should mean, and how simple it could be to educate end users from a security from prohibit end users from doing stupid stuff. Now, next demo, passwordless. It's not really passwordless, but I'm going to show some things that we did for a certain customer that was really helpful. So I'm going to show SCEP, which is not new. It was introduced a while ago, but it makes additional security measures a lot easier. We're going to access the intelligent hub and basically start an application. So what you see here is a conditional access policy within Workspace ONE Access. You can see that all Windows 10 devices will automatically get a user certificate to start a certain application. In this case, Outlook Online. So if I open up Outlook Online, instead of just accepting SAML-based authentication, we add a certificate to the sign-in process. And in this case, the end user needs to select their certificate, but that's just for sake of the demo, because you would automatically create an additional policy that would skip that message. And in this case, I used the certificate to open up Outlook Online, but you could use the certificate to sign into any type of supported application. That makes it a lot easier to, for instance, also automatically sign into a certain, or to, for instance, the intelligent hub. So I think using the certificate makes signing into to apps a lot easier. Right, so I see a poll again. It's in front of my screen. Okay, so John introduced me as a VDI guy, and that's also where like my passion came from. And this presentation wouldn't be done without a proper VDI demo as well. So one of the things that I was working on, I've been working on very long with a couple of different customers, is a way to use modern management in a virtual desktop environment and see where the benefits were. One of the things that we saw at the VMware Explore Roadshow last year, both of them, was that there was a lot of buzz around something they called developer experience. And quite honest, like developer experience, what VMware means during those shows was mainly focused on Tanzu and everything happening around Tanzu. And like developing applications is really awesome from just a Tanzu perspective, but we have a team focusing on DevOps, on Tanzu, on the whole modern app solutions. And what we constantly hear from them when they are at customers and working on customer projects is that if they have to use the customer workspace to develop those solutions, they have a shitty experience. And that's not because of Tanzu, because Tanzu works, but it is because all of their desktops and their endpoints are traditionally managed. They're limited. They don't have the right permissions. They need to do all sorts of things to finally get access to certain developer tools, and that's definitely not what you want to achieve. So we developed this for a customer, and in this case, the customer is an organization focused on healthcare application, and they built their own apps for the Dutch market. So they push code in Python for a living. They work with sensitive data, so privacy sensitive data. The developers are not allowed to store data on the local endpoints, and they love to work from home. Now, prior to us coming into to that customer, the regular process, especially for instance, data scientists, if they wanted a monster machine to run their training data on, the training jobs on, was, a developer requests a new HPC desktop because it's not a regular use case. So they request one with GPUs, a latest GPU, powerful CPUs, etc. So like refreshed every couple of weeks. After half a day, a request is approved by the manager, and after another day, the request is approved by the department head. But now IT has to do something, and they don't have such a machine in their standardized IT catalog. So the request is canceled. Now, after half a day, the employee requests the IT to find a suitable machine in their catalog. They don't have one, so they suggest that the employee will find a certain possible, like a viable solution. Now, all of the options that IT had didn't include the right GPU, so the developer requests to introduce a new option. So again, 3 days later, IT suggests an option. The developer approves the option, and finally, the desktop is requested. So the request was approved by all parties, and now finally, the thing is ordered. After 35 days, because of supply chain issues, such a desktop is delivered, and IT can do stuff. So they need additional 5 days to run a custom Windows 10 script to install all drivers and tools. Then the developer picks up the machine and install like their own developer tools. After another day, the developer is able to work from the office. Really awesome. And now suddenly some kind of pandemic hits and the developer requests to work from home. And IT can help, but they need a lot of time to work on the solution. So after 14 days, they find the solution and the developer is finally able to work from the office, from home, sorry. Based on the fact that he or she has a monster HPC physical desktop that's on premises, and now they remotely connect using some kind of crappy client with a very bad UX and a remoting solution. So after 10 weeks, we have nothing. And I'm guessing there's a lot of US people in and Canadians in the audience who recognize Mike. So there has to be a better way, right? And this is what we developed, a better way. So in the next demo, the end user is going to request a new desktop using Workspace ONE and Jira. So after the desktop is requested, magic will happen. So what you see here is the end user signing into Workspace ONE, to the Intelligent Hub, and they open up Jira. In Jira, they basically, in Service Desk, they request a developer machine with some comments. When it's created, the ticket, automatically a couple of things will happen. First of all, the user information will be retrieved, the entitlement information will be retrieved, and then finally the entitlement will be added. Now you can see here automatically that Han has been assigned to a pool called Workspace ONE Enrollment. And for the sake of this demo, we have to manually sync the collection in Workspace ONE Access. There's no API call as far as I know. And what you see now is that after syncing, if we open up the details, one user was added to the pool called Workspace ONE Managed Desktops. Right. Now, in the next demo, I'm going to show the first logon. So the user will sign in, start Workspace ONE, open up the developer desktop, and we'll see more magic. So begin state is the end state of the previous demo. We're going to refresh Intelligent Hub and automatically see that there's a new application. If we open up that application, go to the virtual desktop, and I see that the demo, I added the previous demo, which doesn't really matter. It's the same thing, just started from an IGEL device. So what you see now is that a little bit of customization happens first time the end user signs in. And what's really awesome, I'll explain in a bit why, is when the end user now opens up the Intelligent Hub, they have to do one thing: sign in with their group ID. And they'll end up after adding their password for the last time. To a state where VMware Tunnel, Carbon Black Cloud, all compliancy policies, all security policies have already been pushed prior to sign in. So as soon as a user signs in, the whole thing is already secured from the ground up, and they can do whatever they want from this moment on, directly after first sign in. I think this is really, really awesome, and also really easy for the end users to work in a secure manner. Now, the next demo, we're going to automatically install some dev tools. So the employee will start Workspace ONE, and more magic will happen. I'm going to show some secret sauce behind the magic. So you're looking at Workspace ONE UEM, and there's 5 different machines in it. The above one is the NUC desktop where I was signed into, where all demos were recorded from. And machine 2, 3, and 4 are virtual machines automatically enrolled into Workspace ONE after provisioning. And you can see that the second one is also already assigned to me as a user, to Han, while the third and the fourth are still assigned to staging lab Vihoyan, and that's a staging user. So what you will see in a bit is, first of all, that it's entitled to me. So user enrollment was already executed. You can see that there's a freestyle orchestrator workflow called DevTools that will automatically be executed as soon as a virtual desktop has been enrolled. So I created a smart group called VDI, and all virtual desktops that are being enrolled are automatically part of that smart group. Based on that fact, Freestyle Orchestrator will automatically install developer tools as soon as the machine is being provisioned. So you can see now here that after the user enrollment, those tools have been installed. So it's that easy. End user doesn't have to do anything. What happens next is that the user gets a question from the, and I'll pause this for a little bit, from the micro surveys. They get a question like, what type of developer are you? Do you develop Windows.NET apps, Python, or are you a front-end developer? Based on this answer, and I think this is one of the most undervalued solutions within Workspace ONE Intelligence, you can basically do something with the answer. So there's a hidden feature called Automate. You need to push those 3 buttons, those 3 dots at the micro survey section in Workspace ONE Intelligence. And if you click that, there's an Automate feature. If you click on the Automate feature, you can basically automate anything based on the answer that you got. In this case, I trigger something based on the fact that the survey data is filled in. The answer was Python. In this case, it automatically means that I add a tag to the device. And a tag, in this case, is basically a configuration item in UEM. So I go to the settings in UEM, go to tags. I create a tag, and we can call it anything. There's .NET developers there, for instance. There's a secured state. There's, in this case, also Python developers. And we can create a smart group or an assignment group based on that tag. So what we select here is that all devices in my environment that have that tag will do something. And in this case, you can see that the machine is also part of that tag, of that smart group. So it was tagged by Workspace ONE Intelligence, and Freestyle Orchestrator uses that tag to do something. And I think this is really cool. So based on the answer the end user gave, that they're a Python developer, we can automatically install Python using Workspace ONE Intelligence and Freestyle Orchestrator. Now, in the future release, that will be merged into a single automation workflow. And if
I have
we
a
now,
question for you there.
sorry,
You don't need a tag anymore now, right? Because Freestyle is now inside of Intelligence. Or
Yeah.
do you think you're still going to use a tag?
but I'm unsure if it's already enrolled for everyone. So
Oh, that freestyle. Yeah, it's a good.
Yeah.
It's the two different things. So there's
Yeah.
one freestyle inside of UEM, and the other one was the old workflow automation, and that's now freestyle and intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
So
it
it can't
will
really trigger everything.
it will change, and it will simplify things, but it does, like doing it like this, it does show the versatility and the I think the art of the possible. Like it's not intended for this solution, but it works really well. So because you can now see that Python has been installed.
No, I hear you. I just get a little traumatized every time I see tags used.
All right. Yeah.
It's more a me problem than you problem.
Okay. Well, you can also see now that a lot of apps have been installed automatically without, again, the end user having to do anything. And I think also, like Sean Bass presented last year about desired state configuration. I think this is a perfect example of what desired state could look like, but from an end user perspective, because the end user will define, I'm a Python developer, and that's my desired state. And so I think this is really awesome. Now, some considerations, and I'm running almost at the end of my time. It's currently just for persistent VDI. I don't, and there's I intentionally not mention full clones, because one of the things that we're working on is to see if we could get it supported on longer lived instant clones as well. It works, but the only downside of that is that you need a process to automatically remove the account from Workspace ONE UEM. And that's where the challenge currently lies. But it does work with instant clones as well, as long as they're longer lived. Staging enrollment happens during provisioning, so that's really important to know. And there's an intention why it's twofold, because some of the tools you want to automatically install during the staging enrollment when a desktop is provisioned. And the customization ends with the deployment of the intelligent hub. What we do for that staging enrollment is add an additional command to the customization spec in vCenter. So vCenter has a customization spec to customize a full clone, and that customization spec has a couple of custom commands. First, the enrollment. Second, a reboot. And after that, if the user signs in, they can basically continue the enrollment and do their user section. I think that this is really awesome. Now, circling back to the question of the session, what if Jurassic Park had an anywhere workspace or a modern workspace? Well, first of all, I think the attack surface would be a lot smaller, because we have the tools in place to reduce those security vulnerabilities, or like to be less vulnerable to attackers. And attackers in this case doesn't mean hackers and people that want to do bad things to your organization. It's also misuse by end users. So that's definitely something you want to avoid. Another one, I think, is that you're going to be less dependent on IT silos, because a lot of has been automated, and you fully implement self-service where possible. So if something breaks for an end user, it's fairly simple to remediate by just either re-enrolling your device or requesting a new virtual desktop. It's that simple. And finally, I think, and this is really one of the most beneficial things, implementation is fairly easy, but implementing changes is easy as well. Like, it doesn't take multiple years to migrate from an OS to another one, or I think that the way UEM and the former Anywhere Workspace architecture is set up is that you can like work with low-hanging fruit and implement smaller security-related features on the go. I will click through that really fast. Some key takeaways: employees are your key to success. So yeah, listen to them, talk to them. It's really important. Already mentioned it. Start with low-hanging fruit. Like, implementing Tunnel is not that hard. Implementing SASE is not that hard. Just start with a couple of use cases and move your way up. I think that's really important. I presented the talk about the zero trust journey for a customer that we worked with in the last couple of years. It took multiple years for them to fully implement the zero trust policy, and that's it's quite hard if you want to do that big bang. So yeah, start with low hanging fruit, and definitely don't be like Dennis. So, are there any questions? Well, if not, then, or maybe later, just drop me a DM on Twitter or drop me an email, Johan at itq.nl, and I'm happy to answer any type of questions that might arise. Oh, I see some stuff happening in the Q&A, or is it answered? Oh, why is the chat disabled? Right.
It's addressed. I'm bad.
Ah,
That's really all there is to know.
cool. Well, thanks everyone. And I think, again, John, great work of setting this up. Looking
Thank you,
forward to the next one.
Thank
And
you.
I think now everyone will enjoy Steven's presentation.
Again,
Perfect.
thank you.
Thank you, Johan.
Yep, thank you. Take it away, Stephen.
Awesome. So I don't have any crazy awesome demos for you guys today like Johan had. But what I'm going to be doing is taking it back to basics. If I can just share my screen here. Just to confirm, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yep, we can see it.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, again, I'm Stephen Wagner. Big thanks to John for putting together the Digital Workspace VMUG group. And thank you to Johan for doing the presentation on Workspace ONE. And I'm looking forward to Sascha's presentation on identity services. Today, I'm going to be doing a very high-level introduction into VDI for those of you who haven't gotten your hands dirty with it yet. Essentially a crash course on virtual desktop infrastructure with VMware Horizon. So a little bit about me. My name is Stephen Wagner. I'm a 3-time VMware vExpert. Just found out last Friday that I'm in the vExpert Pro program, the EUC sub-program, as well as the security program. I'm also an NVIDIA NGCA advisor, and I'm also a VMUG leader in the Calgary, Alberta, Canada region. My specializations are kind of all over the place. Last 6 years have been a lot of EUC and pretty much everything related, underlying infrastructure, the virtualization layers, storage, architecture, integration, as well as the various vendors and products that are part of the entire VDI landscape, like VMware, Microsoft, Linux, and Azure, as far as all the SSO integrations and everything like that go. A big personal hobby of mine, however, is vGPU accelerated workloads, specifically on VDI. So for fun and for work, I tend to get my hands dirty with that quite often. I have a technology blog, www.stephenwagner.com. I get quite a bit of traffic on my posts related to virtual desktop infrastructure. I also do a whole bunch of non-VDI related stuff. So if you haven't been to the blog, check it out. Heavily involved in the community, so feel free to reach out. I love questions, love helping people out. My email address is stephenw@digitallyAccurate.com. And just a side note, I'm the president of Digitally Accurate Inc. We're a VMware partner, and as of July, we'll be around for about 17 years. So what is VDI? So virtual desktop infrastructure, my mom asked me the question once, and I said, Mom, it's like a desktop computer, but it's virtualized. What does it allow you to do? So
did she ask you what is virtualized when you said that to her?
Actually, no, believe it or not, my mom actually knows what virtualization is because of all the time she spent with me, and she's quite familiar with VMware. So thank you.
That would have been my mom's question if I said that. So yeah, good for your mom. That's good.
Didn't have to go through that rabbit hole, go down that rabbit hole. So what does VDI get you? So there's about 4 big takeaways that I like to always put emphasis on. So one is virtualized desktops for end users. These desktops can be persistent desktops like your traditional computers. They can be non-persistent desktops. So essentially they get created and destroyed on the fly. The desktops that you deliver with virtual desktop infrastructure, specifically with VMware Horizon, it all sits on top of your VMware infrastructure. So your IT staff is going to be very accustomed to dealing with the underlying infrastructure and should fairly easily be able to learn the various VDI technologies that sit on top of it. You get secure access to these virtual desktops virtually from anywhere that you would like to have. You deploy these UAGs, you can enable external access. Users can work from home, they can work from their computers, their tablets, their mobile phones. Pretty much the sky's the limit as far as that goes. Now, what do we run on these desktops? We run applications. So this opens up a huge door for application delivery. Whether you deliver these applications through the VDI desktops, through RDSH session hosts, or you actually have users log directly into the client and get these applications, or use VMware app volumes to put the applications inside of the VDI desktops or RDSH hosts. Essentially, you can push your app anywhere, and ultimately enables the path to modernize application delivery with solutions like VMware Workspace ONE. Now, one of the big selling points of this is you get ease of EUC management. So you're eliminating the burden of, in most environments, dealing with physical computers or physical workstations. We know how much of a drain that can be on the IT org, your support staff. And so by centralizing everything and being able to control it, it's almost software defined. You can get to a stage where, if you have these thinner zero clients, you don't have to deal with the hardware anymore. Like, of course, you have to deal with your server hardware, but it's an entirely different ballpark. It's a lot easier to deal with. I like to say that instant clones are the way of the future. So when you deploy non-persistent VDI, instant clones, it's all about the base image. So literally, if you know your base image is functioning, if you know it's been tested, you push it out. It's the age-old phrase when someone calls in for support, have you restarted your computer? When it comes to non-persistent VDI, restarting your computer or logging off and logging back on essentially gets you a brand spanking new desktop. So if by chance the user's session is in an odd state, just the action of logging off, logging back in gets them a fresh desktop for the most part, and corrects a whole bunch of issues. And with all that being said about getting these new desktops, when it comes to ransomware, these malicious actors, and this is a selling point that you hear many major vendors talk about, is these attackers usually have access to a compromised system for, it could be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months before a malicious payload is executed. When it comes to non-persistent VDI, because these VMs are destroyed, technically in a preferable situation, if the VM became compromised and the user is not aware of this, logs off at the end of the day, that VM is destroyed and replaced with a fresh VM, which is perfect for eliminating any malicious lingering actors that might have caught hold of jumping into a user session. And finally, you can secure all of this behind 2FA or MFA solutions like Duo, Azure. There's a couple other ones that I've seen deployed like Ping ID. So the next question is going to be, who's a good candidate for VDI? If this slide loads. I like to say pretty much everyone. But if we narrow it down to a few use cases, you have your general purpose desktop users. These can be office workers, call centers, data processing analysts, very simplistic environments that they require. So technically, you can just spin up a non-persistent VDI image, load up all the necessary applications and deploy it to a desktop pool, entitle these users, and just have at it. Now, when it comes to power users, their requirements are slightly different. They may or may not need special applications, different applications, or you might have business units or certain groups of users inside of the organizations that require a slightly different environment. Now, there's a few options for this. Like Johan mentioned, persistent desktops. So you can deploy persistent desktops for a user that needs a truly static environment. However, there's other solutions too. Like, for example, you can deploy non-persistent virtual machine VDI desktops and then either have separate desktop pools, separate base images with the apps baked in, or you can use solutions like VMware App Volumes, where you can actually assign apps to the users, and then they get connected when the user logs in, and they get what they need access to. Taking this a step further into some more advanced use cases, and this is one of my favorites, is architectural designers and engineers. They need very, very powerful desktops. They need CPU, they need GPU, they need a whole ton of applications. And this is where VDI really shines, because you can enable these users to a VDI desktop that has a vGPU instance attached to it. These users will have Xeon processors, and they will be able to run the applications that they require very powerfully. When it comes to comparing the cost to doing traditional computers, if you have 100 engineers that require $10,000 or $15,000 workstations, why spend that much money on all this hardware that is going to be sitting idle for some time, when you can instead throw it into a VDI environment, consolidate all the resources, eliminate the wasted CPU cycles, and essentially give these users very powerful environments to do their CAD work. And then IT's happy because it's so much more easier to manage. And then jumping back to Johan's example of software developers, they're a perfect candidate. My brother's a software developer, and the company, the organization that he's at, they're spending a fortune on very, very, very expensive laptops for their users to be able to work from home. And I look at traditional EUC or traditional desktop computers, and I'm just thinking, if you were to deploy VDI, you could enable your software developers to work from anywhere in the world, and they would have a very powerful environment that they could code and compile. And at the same time, too, you don't have to have all your data scattered across all these computers all over the world. The users would simply just connect into the VDI environment, and everything would be there. Their entire development environment would be there. So if one of the cheaper laptops that they're using to connect to the VDI environment were to get lost or destroyed, there's no data on it, and it's a lower cost because everything's the focus is on the VDI infrastructure. And then, of course, you have numerous other use cases. Sorry, I don't know why that skipped over. So you have numerous other use cases, and these are remote home workers, kiosks with unauthenticated access that you can do with Horizon. And it's a really good way to enable access to the environment for contractors. The worst thing you want to do is provide VPN access, whether it's for a contractor or an employee. It's just old school. It's dangerous. It's a huge security risk. So on the technical side, let's take a look at what a VMware Horizon deployment looks like in its most simple terms. By the way, I see some chat. I don't have the chat open, so if there are any questions, I'm going to ask that John reads them and jumps in with them. So feel free to ask them as I do the presentation.
You want me to read one now?
Go for it.
Sure. Let's there's a lot of chat going on here. So let's see where we want to start here.
Yeah, first question. How do you do your hair that awesome?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
How do you do your hair that awesome?
It just happens. I wake up, just throw some stuff in it, slick it back.
Great answer.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read the most recent question. If anybody else has any additional questions, if you can just put it in the question and answer, the Q&A, that'll be a lot more helpful. Claudio asked, based on your experience, vGPU virtual WK for applications like SolidWorks or CADIA, can you do designs on non-persistent instant clones, or does this type of use case usually have to be done on persistent?
So each application that you want to deploy, SolidWorks, I haven't had any experience yet deploying it in non-persistent based environments. AutoCAD, definitely, yes, you can virtualize it with non-persistence with vGPU. I've got a couple of customers that I'm doing that with right now.
I think we can continue to go on, Stephen.
Okay.
Like I said, again, if people have questions, please post them in question and answer. It just helps a lot.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So this diagram I created is a VMware Horizon deployment in the most simplest of terms, I guess you could say. Essentially, you have a Horizon client device, whether it's a mobile device, a tablet, computer, thin or zero client, connecting through the internet to a VMware unified access gateway, which provides secure access to the VDI environment. It then jumps and connects to a Horizon connection server, which brokers the connection. The connection server works with the vCenter server to make sure that a VM is provisioned. And then the connection server communicates with the VMware Horizon agent that's running in the VM, and a connection is established. Now, keep in mind that this is a very simple deployment. In most cases, when you get into larger environments, you would have load balancers sitting in front of the UAGs, and you would have multiple UAGs. You would also have load balancers sitting in front of the connection servers, just to make sure that you have a highly redundant and highly available environment. And then, of course, you have all your supporting infrastructure, being your Active Directory servers, vSphere, vCenter, ESXi, as well as your profile servers that you're using for profile management if you're doing non-persistent VDI. So whenever I talk to customers or end users, I always like to kind of summarize the solution architecture into about 6 components. You have your VDI infrastructure, which is essentially the physical infrastructure that sits underneath it. So you have your vCenter server, you have your ESXi hosts, you have your connection servers, and then you have your VDI guest VMs. On top of that, you have your user profiles. You have to factor in app delivery. There's a couple considerations on licensing, and then backup. And yes, those are 2 tape libraries that I sold about 10 years ago. Tape is still a thing. It's fast and effective. Not recommending it. It's for very specific use cases. So when we jump into the VDI infrastructure, we can break it up into a few different components. So you have your Horizon connection servers, which are kind of at the center of it. You can have multiple connection servers that perform load balancing. And you can have those connection servers sitting behind a load balancer that pretty much provides access over a virtual IP. In front of those connection servers, you'd have your unified access gateways. Again, you can have multiple UAGs. They're supported for redundancy. You can configure UAGs in a high availability mode. But usually what I see and what's preferred is to have load balancers sitting in front of them. Horizon connection servers can directly facilitate connections. So in an internal network, you can have users connecting to your connection servers directly, use UAGs for external access. But I also have customers that have 4 UAGs facing externally, 4 UAGs facing internally. So it all depends on the solution architecture. One of the big things that I always say is try to keep things as simple as possible and deploy only what you need. Then in addition to all of that, you have your Active Directory. So you have your GPOs, you have your AD objects, and you have your OUs that you create for the various desktop pools or VDI guest VMs that sit on top of there. And then a big consideration on top of that as well is Azure AD and AD SSO. One thing that's really interesting is that as of the most recent release, I think it's Horizon 2303, you can now actually do Azure AD SSO with primary refresh tokens without the requirement of ADFS, which is a pretty sweet new feature. Then again, I mentioned the VMware vSphere. So you have your vCenter server. The connection server communicates with the vCenter server to facilitate all the VM calls. And the Horizon agent also communicates with the connection server as well. And then you have your 2FA and your MFA solution. So in my case, I do a lot of duo deployments. And there's various options as far as how you want to configure that. You can have it so that all users are prompted for 2FA, which is what I always prefer. But one thing I see being deployed quite often is 2FA on the UAGs for external access. And organizations will allow users to connect internally without a 2FA prompt. So now when it comes to the VDI guest virtual machines, essentially there's two ways that you can deploy these. You can either do persistent VMs or you can do non-persistent VMs. So persistent VMs are very static. These virtual machines are always going to be running. The VMs are much like your server infrastructure that you're probably already virtualizing with VMware. They run 24/7. They will be consuming resources. They have a very large footprint because each of these virtual machines will have its own VMDK, its own virtual disk file. So you'll definitely want to have some type of deduplication storage system backing it. While you can use profile persistent with non-persistent VMs, they actually don't require them. And when you have persistent VDI deployed, you manage these much like traditional computers, traditional desktops that the users would have on their desks. You need to patch them, whether you're using WSUS or SCCM. You'll probably have an RMM platform that you use to connect to these computers and support just like you would with traditional computing. Now, where things get really cool is with non-persistent VDI. And so these non-persistent VDI guest VMs get essentially provisioned dynamically on the fly. Preferably, you would have them destroyed or refreshed on log off, and they can be floating or dedicated assignments. So with a floating pool, the way that this works is that users that are assigned to a desktop pool, a group of VDI guest VMs, they would connect and they would just get access to one of the VMs that are free. You would normally allocate a couple of extra VMs so that first thing in the morning, you don't have a ginormous boot or login storm. But you also have the option to do dedicated assignments. And so this is where when a user logs into a dedicated assignment desktop pool, they're assigned a VM that, while it does get refreshed on a regular basis, preferably after log off, they will always get the same computer name and I believe also the same MAC address. And this is perfect, especially I have a bunch of customers that use a whole bunch of security software that's pretty finicky about this kind of stuff. So we use dedicated pools to make sure that the users always have the same computer name as well as MAC address. Non-persistent VDI instant clones have an extremely small footprint. So literally, you're looking at the storage of the base image plus the storage delta from the snapshot when the instant clone is created. So you could have 100 users. You're just going to have a base image and 100 deltas. And as a lot of you know, these deltas from a snapshot can be extremely small. Horizon uses a technology called VM fork. And I believe it actually even includes branching off of the memory. So you should actually observe a reduced memory footprint as well when you're doing non-persistent VDI, which is really good as far as it comes to consolidation. Now, the one thing is when it comes to non-persistent VDI, you do have to have some sort of user profile persistence solution. And this is one of the things that I've seen a lot of smaller organizations struggle with is when they hear the words non-persistent VDI, it's an instant no, because they have this expectation that the user's environment is actually going to be destroyed on log off. That's not true. I've deployed non-persistent VDI VM where when you deploy a user, I can actually even do this for organizations' IT staff, and the IT staff have no idea that they're using a non-persistent VM because the user profile persistence solutions have evolved so much, which I'll be getting to in a couple seconds here. And with non-persistent VDI, all of the focus is targeted on the base image. So that's super handy because, again, you know, users call for support, you tell them to log off and log back in. The base images and the snapshots that you deploy as IT, they're tested and they're secured. At least they should be. So you know that the base image is working, which helps really significantly reduce support tickets. So with the non-persistent VDI, we have to have a discussion about user profiles. And so essentially, there's a few different ways that you can tackle profile and environment persistence. One of the big ones that I've been doing a lot lately is with FS Logics. The way that FS Logics works is that you can either have a profile container or an Office 365 container. These essentially redirect the user's profiles and the user's Office 365 profile to a VHD or a VHDX container disk that would sit on top of your profile server. And this is really nice because it's a filter level driver. So when the user logs in, it gets connected to the VM by the operating system. The users have no idea. It's completely transparent to most applications, transparent to the user, and it works really well. Another solution, one that actually comes bundled with VMware Horizon, is the VMware Dynamic Environment Manager, DEM. DEM's focus is more on user setting persistence. It also gives you, or it also enables you to essentially configure the user's environment on the fly. So if you get to the point where you need to implement DEM, you can use it if GPOs are becoming a big problem. It stores the user's settings, so it provides profile persistence to a certain degree. Now, on top of all that as well, there's also VMware App Volumes, writable volumes, which is a really cool technology to see deployed. When a user logs in with writable volumes, it'll attach a VMDK file to the VM that's specific for that user. And you can redirect the user's profile into that VMDK. And you can also do software that gets installed into user profiles. Now, one other thing that I always like to mention is a legacy technology called folder redirection. And it's extremely helpful. Let's say that you deploy FSLogix with a customer. FSLogix can store the user's My Documents, desktops, and all their user folders. However, if that profile container ever became corrupt, you would essentially lose all those files. When using DEM, you actually use DEM to configure folder redirection to redirect those folders. Now, jumping back to FSLogix, when you enable folder redirection, you can redirect the user's folders so that if the profile ever becomes corrupt, you can simply delete the profile. You'll still have all the user's My Docs and desktop because they're being stored separately through folder redirection. And it's nice to keep the profile sizes very small and condensed because, in an optimum situation, you only want to store what you need to inside of the FSLogix profile containers. And then you also get the benefit of doing the folder redirection to a network server. You get VSS snapshot copies. Some organizations, they actually train their staff on how to self-service with VSS. So now keep in mind that all of these technologies are stackable. So I've had customers that have started off as very small businesses. They implement FSLogix to keep it very simple and sweet. They grow, their VDI usage grows. They realize how much money they can save by deploying VDI. And then they start tacking on other solutions. So they jump into DEM and use DEM on top of FSLogix. Then they'll enable their Office 365 container. So you have options as far as how you want to deploy this. Just by purchasing Horizon, it doesn't mean that you need to implement the entire stack. You want to do what's appropriate for your environment in its most simplistic form, because you want to keep it easy to manage and easy to support. So now when we get into app delivery, there's a few different ways that you can deploy apps inside of the environment. You can, in very simple environments, bake the applications into the base images. This provides the best performance. If you have a small number of users that all need the same applications, this is a great option. Keeps it sweet and simple. Or what you can do is you can deliver applications with RDSH hosts. So you can bring an RDSH farm into Horizon. You can deploy those applications into the user's VDI session, or you can launch those applications from the Horizon client itself. And then, of course, as you start getting into more complex environments where the users that are connecting have a very diverse amount of applications that they require, that's when you can start taking a look at it using something like app volumes, which is where apps are essentially packaged into VMDK files. You can have a very simple base image with either no applications or just a couple applications that all the users use, like Office 365. And then you can use app volumes to actually deliver the applications the users need, like AutoCAD or WinZip, stuff like that. And these, of course, would be assigned based on group membership, OUs, and that sort of thing. And app volumes can also be used with RDSH. Now, one thing that's really cool is sometime in the last 4 to 6 months, VMware actually released Publish Apps on Demand. And this is a really cool technology because, for example, if you have a whole bunch of RDSH instant clones inside of your Horizon environment, these RDSH hosts, as users log in to get a session with their VDI desktop and to launch applications from the RDSH farm, it will attach the VMDKs on demand to the RDS server and deliver those applications. So if you have 4 users using WinZip, it loads up the VMDK, they connect to it. When all 4 users log off and their session is terminated, it actually unloads the VMDK and the app package from the RDSH host. And I see some chats. John, is there any questions?
Let's see here. I was hoping they're going to be, we get some stuff in Q&A now. So the first question I have here is Lindsay was asking how most people are licensing Windows on these VDIs.
So that in itself would be its own presentation. When it comes to Microsoft licensing, there's been some major shifts.
VDI license add-on, right? You can buy, if I recall. I'm done.
Yeah, so if you have the older open volume licensing, there was an add-on that you could purchase. Everything's moved over to the CSP model now. Technically, if you have the budget and if you have the money, there's the VDA licensing, which keep things short and sweet. But definitely, this is would either require its own presentation because it's Microsoft licensing, and we all know how complex that is, or you'd have to reach out to your preferred Microsoft partner. But even with any advice that they give you, make sure you do research because even some of the partners aren't too familiar with it.
Yeah, I can agree with that, especially with Windows licensing. Claudio is also asking, with virtual WK projects, how do you size the internet bandwidth needed for remote locations? So there are many variables to consider, number and resolution of monitors, type of application, etc. Is there any tool that you recommend that helps with sizing? One anecdote to point out with this is that they got rid of all the Horizon sizing tools, even as VMware partners. They no longer are available. You now have to go to the vendors like Dell or whoever to actually get sizing tools for VDI. I don't know why, but it's a thing I ran into not so long ago.
Yeah, so in a lot of the situations that I've been in where customers have had concerns about bandwidth, we've always kind of had to start up a sub project. None of their users working from home have the same types of setups and configurations. So we would go through and try to identify, do some testing. I actually have a document that I did up for myself where I did a whole bunch of testing with Blast, H.264 done by CPU, H.264 done by GPU. And we had to compare those numbers to user counts, find out how many displays the users were having to kind of come up with the requirements. Bandwidth is critical. There's a whole bunch of technologies in Blast, which is the remoting protocol that Horizon uses that can optimize sessions. But the problem is that on the data center side, if you're running short on bandwidth, it can cause that software optimization to go ballistic. So I wouldn't say that, in my experience, I don't use tools. I use manual measurements. That might not be the most efficient way of doing things, but it's preferred to come up with specific numbers.
Yeah, there actually are vendors, not to plug Johan's company, but there are actually vendors who have also built their own VDI baselining tools for sizing, because sizing is a big problem now. Because like I said, we used to have a tool that actually allowed you to do your own sizing, and they got rid of it. So it's kind of challenging as well. There's also a tool, if you engage with VMware partners, that you can actually build this. I don't know if you've used this or not, Steve, but there's actually, it's basically an OVA you deploy in someone's environment, and it collects a bunch of data and basically tells you how good or bad of a job you did on your deployment. It's actually a VMware partner utility that professional services typically have used, but we actually can get access to it as well. Anyway, there's another question I get from Jody asking, talking about how obviously app volumes replaces some of the older thin app technology. They're asking, does it act like a Docker container? Is it generally compatible with most apps, such as CAD or even older 32-bit apps?
So app volumes doesn't act like a container. Essentially, it uses a filter level driver to, from my technical understanding, to record registry changes, redirect, or I'm not too sure if it redirects or duplicates the reads and writes, but it puts it into a VMDK file that gets essentially attached to VDI VMs. Now, when you package these apps, usually when I jump into a customer's environment, the when we create a base image, we actually clone that to create an app packaging instance, because the system that you do all your app packaging on, you want to be as close to the actual base images that you're deploying. This applies to the various frameworks that you might have to install in order to support these applications. And you also want to keep them fairly close as far as any operating system changes, just to maximize the compatibility and ensure like a smooth deployment of it. And what was the second half of that question?
They're asking about, let's see here, about compatibility with applications like CAD or older 32-bit apps.
Yeah, so I haven't had too many issues as far as application support goes. The comment that I made about framework is very important. I always try to get all the frameworks that can be manually installed into the base images manually first. I don't like to have those inside of the app packages. As far as application goes, there's always the licensing considerations that apply. There's quite a few applications that aren't licensed properly to the point where they can be deployed in non-persistent environments. And so because of that, it just kind of nulls and voids the whole usage of app volumes. But there are applications that can be fairly tricky to deploy with app volumes. So it's one of those things where you have to do testing. And then you also have to find out, as far as the life cycle of these app packages, whether you can actually update them, or if you have to, as part of the updating process, you actually have to do fresh installs on your app packagers. So it can be a little bit of a game.
Thanks, Stephen. I think in the interest of time, we probably should try to push forward a little bit.
Okay, sounds good. So jumping on to the next slide, licensing. So I'm going to save the conversation for the actual licensing of Horizon for your your preferred VMware partner. But when it comes to the actual infrastructure, one thing I always like to point out to customers is that Horizon comes with vSphere for desktop. So in a perfect world where you're following best practices, typically you would deploy your VDI environment on hardware separate from your server virtualization environment. Because it's just best to have it running on its own hardware. You're not fighting with server virtual machines. You're not dealing with CPU ready times unnecessarily. And so with that, you would deploy vSphere for desktop. It's based off of the concurrent user counts that you're licensed for, and it actually permits and allows you to run a couple, not necessarily a couple, few server VMs that pertain to the delivery of VDI. So, for example, your profile servers that you're using to deliver profiles for your VDI guests, those can be virtualized under vSphere for desktop. Domain controllers can be virtualized. However, deploying line of business applications, file servers, any type of hosting services is totally not permitted. Now, if you are going against best practice, and if you're a smaller organization that doesn't have the budget to have separate hardware for your VDI environment, you can have it all as one. However, you just need to make sure that you don't use the vSphere for desktop licensing, and you have to use the licensing for vSphere that you've already purchased, which may or may not have the same capabilities as vSphere for desktop. And then there's always backup. It's easy. With persistent VMs, you can handle it with your preferred backup solution. So, for example, you can use Veeam. If you were to use Veeam, the big problem is that if you have 50 persistent desktops, that's going to consume 50 licenses, which can cost quite a bit. Jumping over to non-persistent VMs, we don't care about the instant clones because they're either getting refreshed or created and destroyed on the fly. So the main focus is on your base images. So if you have one base image, it's one one backup license. And then, of course, you just need to make sure that you back up all your supporting infrastructure. So that would be your FS Logic servers, your DEM servers, your app volume servers, and anything else that's relevant to the environment. And now a big problem that a lot of organizations struggle with is solution maintenance. And, I always say be one with the interop. I can't stress enough how important it is to read the interoperability guides. You have to update your physical infrastructure, firmware updates, whether it's Dell, HPE, or the other major vendors. You have to update your Horizon connection servers, vSphere, vCenter, ESXi hosts. You also have your VMs. Dealing with persistent VMs is a pain because, again, it's treated like traditional computing. So you have to have some type of update management because you want to make sure that you keep your guests patched applications patched. Non-persistent really shines in the fact that it's IT managing the base images. So when it comes time to update, you just update the base image, snap it, or will you seal it, snap it, push it out to the desktop pool, and it's done. Of course, after a little bit of testing. And then again, jumping back to being one with the interop, you got to check the interoperability guides. You need to make sure that the combination of the various software operating systems, vSphere versions is compatible. Like, for example, I think it was only the most recent version of vGPU that supported Windows 11 22H2. You also need to make sure that your connection server supports 22H2 if you're planning on deploying it, and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to try to go through this a little bit faster for time's sake. GPU is a passion of mine, so I just wanted to put a little bit of emphasis on it. In this picture, this is an NVIDIA A2 that I have in my own server. Whenever you deploy, for example, NVIDIA vGPU, you get GPU 3D acceleration, you offload the video session, the remoting protocol, whether that's H.264, H.265, or AV1 as of the newer versions. Overall, it provides an enhanced user experience. And you can virtualize pretty much any type of application when you start getting into the proper licensing, whether it's AutoCAD, SolidWorks, ArcGIS. And there's three major offerings that under the vGPU body that they have: RTX VWS, which is where you get the entire 3D acceleration with CUDA, OpenGL, OpenCL. You have your virtual PC, which provides an enhanced user experience for power or knowledge workers. And then you have your virtual applications, vApps licensing, which allows you to provide accelerated application streaming and delivery from RDSH session hosts or from VDI desktops if you're only pushing applications from the desktops and not the full desktops itself. Again, I'll try to be short with this because of time, but one thing I like to demo on my laptop is I've got this NVIDIA A2 in one of my servers. I've got a Windows on ARM laptop that has built-in 5G. This thing lasts for weeks without a charge. It supports offload, so I'll connect to my VDI environment. I'll load up MechWarrior 4, and literally people are shocked when they see how well a game works over 5G with low latency with 3D acceleration. It's one of those things. So yes, it can run Doom. And so the final result, what do you get? You get powerful delivery of desktops, you get all your apps everywhere, and all of it is provided very securely. So you've got happy users, a happy IT department, and happy executives. And so with that being said, feel free to reach out to me. I'm very heavily involved in the community. I'm on Twitter, Stephen Wagner 7. I'm on LinkedIn, Stephen W7. You can email me, stephenw@digitallyaccurate.com, or you can visit my blog at www.stephenwagner.com. And that's it.
Thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate you chipping in and providing some great information. And it looks like, you got some really great feedback and everything here. So I want to take the time to introduce, Sascha Warno, who Sascha and I have built a good relationship over the last couple of years. Sascha is, really one of the most brilliant people on the identity side that I've worked with at VMware, outside of, Steve, who obviously no longer works with VMware. And Sascha's been a big help for me with some of the stuff that I've been working on, and we're likely to be speaking together at Explore. And so I wanted to bring Sascha in to talk about this great new VMware Identity Services, which some people may or may not know about. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sascha to go over some really cool VMware stuff.
Okay. Thank you for the kind words. My name is Sascha Warno. I'm a staff architect with VMware directly. I'm with them for over 8 years now. So I just started when they joined VMware from being AirWatch before. And I used to work in different positions. Nowadays, I'm in tech marketing. So I'm trying to promote our newest technical solutions on a technical level, trying to explain it to you, trying to promote it a little bit. I usually work around anything that is security, identity, anything API. So if you want to use or work with intelligence, if you work with Workspace ONE Access, if you want to integrate that with any other product, I'm usually one of the subject matter experts. where people inside the company, but also from outside, try to reach out to. Okay, today I'm here to just give you an overview of VMware Identity Services. And because we try to make everything short, there's already an acronym. So FIS is the unofficial acronym that most people will use nowadays for that new service. First of all, I want to shortly go into what is the background of VMware Identity Services, and mostly what is centralized user management, and why to use SCIM for that one. So nowadays, companies, they face various challenges as they grow and move resources to the cloud, or just in general, if they have a high employee turnover, which then also leads to an increased identity-related requests for user onboarding around permissions, around access, around deletion, and so on. So that whole user management. So that user lifecycle needs to be controlled, needs to be managed, needs to be automated, right? So every aspect of it, you try to do an automation around it. So be it the onboarding, the offboarding, assigning new company resources or applications to a user when they start working, or take away those permissions when they leave the company, for example. And to achieve that level of automation, you can't use several tools. You can't use more of the old school tools. So you don't want to use separate administration portals for all of the different applications where users will get access to, but you want to centralize all of that. And this is also part of zero trust, of the zero trust concept, to centralize everything around the identity into one identity source, and then also handle the authentication and the authorization on that identity source. So more and more companies move for that one to SCIM, and that's System for Cross-Domain Identity Management. And it's a protocol to provision users and groups into those software solutions, first of all. It offers a generic way and a generalized way to push those identities using RESTful API calls with JSON objects. Okay. It allows the important functions like creating, updating, and removing users and groups from one centralized identity source, like an Azure AD, an Okta, Google Identities, which are also often used then to merge like a diverse legacy directories. Like if you have several on-prem ADs because of mergers and acquisitions, and you want to move them all together, quite often we see nowadays that customers move to cloud directories and try to put all of their resources together and manage them directly in a combined manner. And you don't want to use separate connectors or vendor-specific APIs, so SCIM is a way forward there. So it allows you to then integrate with different applications and push the users. So you have a SCIM client and you have SCIM endpoints that then can consume the user objects. Ideally, you will also integrate that with your HR tool. So for all the new processes of onboarding, users will be created in that HR tool, will then be pushed into your identity source that takes care of the authentication. And from there, with that already talked about JSON representation or that JSON user object, we can push them into the different software solutions that the user should have access to in the end. Okay. So it's taking care of creating that user object and maintaining that user object. Like I mentioned, creating, updating, deleting. With VMware Identity Services, so the top is that nice icon for VMware Identity Service or VMware Services. We add another layer of abstraction to that, that we then use SCIM again to actually manage separate solutions behind VMware Identity Services. SCIM by itself is a protocol and a schema that is defined in RFC 7643 that lays out a base set of attributes and groups, and also has the possibility to use extensions for more specific use cases. I mean, you could even do asset management with it, right? So that's also a possibility. But usually we only see it for user and group management with the REST API and the JSON object that is defined, and then providing all the CRUD functionalities, create, read, update, and delete. So you can deliver the whole user lifecycle just by using the Scheme API. And like I mentioned, you had some flexibility, but we also did our own extension. So we have an extension WS1B user. There you can also see the internal project name that was Workspace ONE Broker. And those are the extensions that we require for working with our backend solutions. And those backend solutions are UEM and Access initially. So with centralized user management using Scheme, you can achieve certain benefits. To just call them out again, it's easier to provision users to create, update, delete accounts in an automated way. So reducing human error during the configuration and the maintenance of those users. You improve the access control by centralizing the control for that access to those resources. You improve how users can authenticate to resources. I mean, this is something that was already done with IDPs, right? So where you have centralized authentication policies, where you can centralize the login, where you can have an SSO experience. But with Scheme together, you can then combine it with also the user lifecycle management. And you have a better control of the users and the access to the resources they should have, which makes it easier to comply with certain regulations that require you to have a proof of the access control of the user lifecycle, that you offboard users completely from the applications that you have. So you don't have like permissions lying around for applications that are not managed correctly, where users potentially could still have access to. And with that, you also reduce the risk of data breaches because you have more control. You can better audit what's happening to a user. Is he still onboarded? Where you should have access with that centralized user management. So that's just a generic view on why Scheme, why centralized user management. There's certain reasons why we want to use it in VMware, and why that's the future of how you will onboard users over the next some years, okay? So why in Workspace ONE? Workspace ONE, from my perspective, will be now just Access and UEM, so the classic parts. I will not. Horizon has its own very special place under hard integration with Active Directory, so that will take a bit longer. But let's talk about the parts that we can already address today. And that's mainly Workspace ONE UEM and Access. And from the history of those products, they were developed with LDAP in mind, with ADs in mind, with Open LDAP, etc. All the different forms that customers were using to manage their identities on premises. Okay. And to then get to those users, we would use connectors. So we had separate connectors for those products that are not developed, that were developed in different scenarios, right? Workspace ONE Access actually came from the ThinApp side, then for the Horizon side, and then was integrated as a portal and as a authentication broker for UEM, and then also as the host for hub services nowadays. So there's a requirement to use it when you want to use all the benefits of Workspace ONE UEM to manage your devices in a modern way. But they come from a different past. So they have their own sets of connectors with their own capabilities, their own platforming underneath. And they were used still. What they were doing was similar, that it's a pull-based mechanism. So you install your connector, then you talk to you configure your ADAP, your AD, and you specify, okay, I want to pull those users, I want to pull those groups, and I want to bring them into my solution and enable them to enroll devices, etc. Okay, so pull-based mechanism. That's where we're coming from. Where we see issues with that one is when, with the last some years, we saw quite a lot of customers move to cloud directories because they wanted to standardize on those, or maybe some of them started with those. If you have younger customers, they didn't start with on on-prem AD. Maybe they started directly with Google Identities, directly with Azure AD. So now we have a lot of customers that use that. That makes it hard to use that old mechanism. Okay, that's not really applicable anymore because you can't just have ADAP queries into those cloud identities. So let's blend the old way out. There's some ways that you can address that. So for local administrators, for example, you can use SAML, but then you need to create administrators beforehand. It's local accounts, it's basic accounts. Not ideal. That's not real management. You can sign in, you can make it secure. Not a very good management experience and a good user lifecycle here. And more importantly, for the end user that's trying to sign in, if you want to have the whole experience, there's only some not ideal solutions that we have set up. The most advanced one was with Okta, where we used Scheme 1.1, which was supported by Workspace ONE Access by itself to provision the users, and later on using the AirWatch provisioning adapter to bring those users into Workspace ONE UEM. We have the same set of users, the same attributes in both cases. Some limitations, we didn't provide all of the attributes that are possible that you could send from Okta into Workspace ONE UEM. So maybe some use cases where you wanted to have a custom attribute are not possible. The other way was SAML JIT, which is not a real management solution. You create a user during sign-in, but there's a lot of limitations around that one. So when you create a user with that in Workspace ONE Access, you could either push it through provisioning adapter or also do another form of JIT into Workspace UEM, but we didn't support all use cases. Okay, especially around Azure AD, if you wanted to do OB enrollment, that was not supported. So to get on a more modern way and to unblock users for that one is where we switched over to identity services. But identity services also come with another change in how we address this user management and the admin management. Okay, so the whole solution works only on new tenants that are integrated with VMware Cloud Services or our cloud service platform, and with Workspace ONE Cloud Admin Hub. And they, like I said, they provide a different form of managing the administrators, first of all. So with cloud services, we allow customers to access all of their VMware services out of that cloud service portal. And they even could add their own services if they wanted to with OAuth integration, etc. And this leverages a service called GAS. It's a general authorization service that is running in the background to gain access to those services with admin's account inside the cloud service portal. So you sign into that VMware Cloud Service portal, and you can then assign roles and authorize the users into different services that you procured, that you integrated into that VMware Cloud Services portal. So it's using OIDC JIT to authorize and to create those admin users, and first of all in Workspace ONE Cloud in the admin hub. And from there, you then have access to the other solutions that are enabled, that you have licensed under the Workspace ONE moniker. So in Workspace ONE UEM, Workspace ONE Access, for example, And again, your user will be created with OIDC JIT into those applications. And that would be the way that you as an administrator have access to those services. Okay, that's the new way. In the old days, you got an invitation email, you created a local admin account, and maybe you did an integration with a directory to get your admins in there. So the new way is actually proposing that you start in VMware Cloud Services and then enable your users or the administrators for the different admin portals from there. And you can also federate your own identity provider that you already have, like an Azure Active Directory, Okta, and so on, into VMware Cloud Services. So you can do a federation there as well. What we actually use there is an access tenant, a specific access tenant for that VMware Cloud server, for those VMware Cloud services that is used to federate, that can either talk to an on-prem AD, but can also be used to integrate with cloud identity providers. In that form, as it is now, it's using SAML or OIDC JIT. It can use groups, so it can actually then also allow you to provision users and user groups into services. So you can decide, okay, that specific user group will have access to Workspace ONE UEM, Workspace ONE Access, as a read-only admin, as a full admin, and you can specify that inside that portal. Okay, you can set that one up based on groups that you get through the JIT. And that is the administrator side. So this is how you would handle those. And then we have a separate setup that those new VMware Identity Services that now allow you to provision end users into the backend services. So for that one, we use SCIM, as mentioned earlier, so that this new protocol. And most of the new or newer cloud identity providers will allow you to do that. Okay, so Azure AD, Okta, OneLogin allow you to set up SCIM, a SCIM client, a SCIM endpoint, and then push users into your SCIM endpoints. Okay, so that's a possibility. What that will then do is, first of all, get those users in the VMware Identity Services, and VMware Identity Service you also set up to then push those users into UEM and into Access, create groups in there, and then you can do the enrollment and the assignment of users inside of those applications into your use cases. Okay, so the idea here is now that you have all that centralized, so you get all the same attributes into VMware Identity Services first of all, and from there you can provision them and push them out to the different solutions that you want to use, and you don't need to worry. So nowadays we have sometimes the scenario where we have different attributes in UEM, different attributes in Access. That is now a thing of the past because you will push from the same source and they will also all look the same. And one other thing that you now have is we don't have a pool, so we don't need to configure, okay, I want to pull that group. It's now all configured on the identity provider side. You decide, okay, those users in my identity source, they should have access to enroll devices, and you can now push them, okay? And it's a push mechanism, so whenever you do changes on your identity provider side, it will be pushed out to the system. So if you want to make it dynamic, how you enable users to enroll devices, now you could have processes behind it that actually start up that SCIM process. From the technical side, the VMware Identity Services and Workspace ONE Access are actually kind of co-located. It's the same tenant that is used there, but it has two different configurations. It's a different microservice that is running on your Access tenant that is provisioned for you. And it then provides a configuration to your Access if you did the SCIM configuration. So it will create your directory type, a default domain. It will create the IDP settings that are now used to authenticate the user, because SCIM is not sending any passwords. It's not giving you, like with ACC in the days of the connector, the possibility to do a bind against your domain controller. Okay, that's not possible anymore. So you need to use a form of SAML authentication or OIDC to authenticate the user against your IDP. So all of those rules will be set up through that wizard. And that's then also pushing down the configuration into UEM. And on the UEM side, it's creating a new directory type that you didn't see before. It's SCIM provisioning. It's also using SAML authentication setting. By default, it's actually switching the source of authentication to access. So it's not really using those SAML authentication settings, but it would always redirect to SAML to access anyways to do the authentication of the user to then have all the hub services capabilities as well. Okay. A lot of the things are now read-only. There's no override. So what we expect is that the customer is now handling all of the identity management and user management inside of those VMware identity services. There's no form of overriding that inside of UEM or access. Okay, there's no way of having like a mixed setup at the moment. What you need to have at the moment, official support is Azure AD. It's the very first release. There will be quite some changes coming over the time, but for the first release, Azure AD, generic, Okta, they all have been tested. You need to have cloud service portal access, so your tenant needs to be set up like that. For now, it's greenfield only, so any customer that wants to start, they can do and try now. Your Workspace ONE UEM environment needs to be patch level 7 of 22.12. And with that, you should see the option to do the end user service. So it's not something that we force on the customer, but it's something they can then use and try out if they want to. Like I said, greenfield only, so only for new tenants. For now, it's single directory. We can create officially one domain. That's not really true. You can do multiple actually, and also only one identity provider. That's down to that it's at the moment only GUI. Okay, so it's a graphic user interface to set it up. There is an API coming out. With that, you have much more flexibility. You can integrate with several domains in one directory. You can integrate with several third-party IDP settings.
You can't share yet, Sascha, when it's going to be available to existing tenants, right? You don't know anything more about that at this juncture?
The brownfield will take a bit of time, and I can't tell you any release date on that one. There's no official guidance on that one, and you would need to talk to.
Can you say this year or not? Presumably this year. Can you say this year, as in 2023?
I can't tell you if it's this year. No.
Oh boy,
and I don't think it will be this year. Yeah. So one of the things that make it a bit more complicated, as I mentioned before, the requirement is to have CSP. So one of the things is we need to get all the customers to use CSP to have that automation flow that is in the backend to create all the secrets and the service accounts that are needed to do the backend service of it. So there's a requirement to architect that. And then also the migration process for brownfield customers, how we match one user that is coming from AD or another source into that new user coming from or synced from that VMware Identity Services. Okay, so that still needs to be worked out. For greenfield customers that want to start, that only have cloud directories, it's available. You can see in the product documentation or the limitations or not limitations. I can say that because it's using access as off source, pretty much, it has the same limitations around use cases. So if you have something where you need to do check in, check out, if that's working with access as off source, and it's working for that as well. We still support basic accounts. So if you have staging accounts and rolling a device, and then you want to check it out with a user that is coming from VIS, from VMware Identity Service, that's also working. DEP with custom enrollment, that's also working. But certain use cases won't work because you don't have direct possibilities to put in username and password, right? Because you need to have SAML or ODC now to authenticate the user.
Great, thanks.
With that, and in regards of time, let's move on. And then I just want to point out, you find more information around that on TechZone. There's a blog post with also that is also going through the setup with some videos, how you do that with HOAD, how you do that with Okta. I have that here in the slide deck, but because we're already at top of the hour, I won't show it now, but just follow the link. I think we share the slides, so follow the link. You will get more information in there. Do a trial if you have customers interested in that one. I think we would really appreciate more feedback on that solution to then improve upon it, right? I mean, one of the main thing is brownfield customers. We heard that one. We're working with customers to get that going, but also from the greenfield side, if there's anything that needs to be improved from the interface, from how you can handle it, how you can automate it, happy to hear any feedback. Yeah, so just reach out to us on that one. And with that one, I'm done, just in time. So, questions? So I got a question if that will be available in Test Drive. Because of the way it needs to be set up, it's not available in there. So the best form to test it out nowadays is set up a trial. So all of the trial environments by now are updated. They are able to do that solution or to enable you to try out that solution. So I would go that way. Test Drive usually gave you like a separate OG just for you, but it didn't follow the whole process of enabling a CSP, a cloud service portal account, and allowing you from there to set up your Workspace ONE environments. That is a hard requirement because there are some processes, some automation processes that are linked to that one that can't be enabled in Test Drive.
Great, thanks, Sascha. So in terms of, in the interest of just trying to get everything finished up here, I'm gonna present again just the final 5 minutes, and then everyone can go out, have their lunch or not lunch from that perspective. So I'm just gonna present. Great. So again, thank you to all the people who presented today. It was really appreciated. There's some really good, I think, feedback and interaction. So that was very, very helpful. So for those who want to ask, how can you help? If you could just invite 1 or 2 people to join the VMUG, that would be of ultimate help. And please come to explore. Honestly, every single year, the amount of people, especially UVM people that are at Explore seems to dwindle more and more. So those of please come. I'm going to be hosting a really nice dinner for all the people that do come. Something to try to do something really special since we're back in Vegas. Thank God. No offense to those who love San Fran, but I love Vegas for conferences.
And if I could just jump in here, if you've never been to Explore, I can't stress enough how good of an opportunity it is to learn, to connect, to speak with VMware folks, speak with peers. Can't say enough good things about it. I did my first last year. I'm going back to all of them now.
Yes, agreed. And if you're someone who doesn't have a blog, please just try. That's how it all starts. After AirWatch was bought by VMware, somebody said, "Do you have a blog?" I'm like, why would I do that? And, that's kind of gone okay for me. So just, if you're working on something cool, share it. I mean, that's what matters. Just, if you're sharing and helping, I mean, that's really all that matters. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or anything like that. just to kind of plug VMUG for a second, those of you who probably have general VMUG accounts, which are pretty simple and basic. Today, those of you who have made it through the whole session, one random person, thanks to the VMUG leadership team, Matt specifically, we're going to be giving away one free VMUG Advantage membership. So the people who did make it through the whole session, we'll pick one at random and we'll reach out to you. So you can see here all the great, benefits and values of, the training discounts and eval licenses and test drives. So that, those of you who don't have access to those things and you want to tinker and play, this gives you a really good opportunity to do so. And just, obviously more information about the VMUG Advantage. Or if you don't get picked, you want to buy it yourself, there's a little 10% off there. And lastly, feel free to connect with VMUG in all the different ways that it's available. I will be posting this recording up on my YouTube channel. So I will send out a link to all the attendees after the fact. So if you want to share it with anybody else, it will be out there and available. And just to tie things up, as we are obviously 9 minutes over, probably my fault, but we are 9 minutes over nevertheless. So any questions? Just raise your hand and I can allow you to talk if anyone has any questions or anything. Otherwise, we will finish things up here. And again, thank you everyone for coming. Like I said, it definitely meant a lot. We really appreciate everyone for, just kind of chipping in. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic day.
Everyone.
Yeah, everyone have a great lunch or great rest of your day.